Hello YouTube. Today I'm going to do a review of my onboard Viair air setup. So my onboard air is on my 1996 Toyota Land Cruiser. It's an 80 series Land Cruiser that I've had for maybe 8 months now, 9 months. And build is pretty much done. So you can see the back here. I've got 4x4 Labs bumper. Of course, I'm blocking my license plate because that's what everyone else does on the internet, and I have no idea why. Let's go ahead and take a look at where the air compressor and tank are hiding. This is where the spare tire used to be. You can see we've got air compressor there. That's also trailer wiring, in case you're wondering. And that's my air tank. The outlet comes down here. There's a little plug, but it's a quick disconnect. Very simple setup, and it works really well. This is a 2.5 gallon Viair tank with a 33% duty cycle air compressor. Bought this about 2 years ago to install on my Land Rover. It was a 2001 Discovery 2. Problem was I already spent the $300 on the setup, and I really couldn't find a place to put it in the Land Rover. There was just no space. On the Land Cruiser though, you can see there's tons of room here. This is a US model, so we don't get that second fuel tank that the rest of the world got, at least as an option. I'm not sure, maybe it was standard. So once the spare tire carrier is gone, there's a ton of room. You just have the exhaust to worry about. And my exhaust is a little customized because of the bumper. There's the compressor. I'm using a Viair compressor bracket mount. It actually fits pretty nicely. It's held on with 2 bolts. So one of the bolts is for the bumper itself, you can see, and the other one actually goes through the chassis, all the way to the other side. I don't like drilling into my frame, so this was the best way, the cleanest way to install it. My air intake there, I'm going to reroute that. I don't know where to put it, so I just put it there for now. It's just kind of hanging there. I'm not really too pleased with it, so I'm maybe going to route it up higher, maybe into the engine bay, or maybe behind the tail light. Wherever I decide to put it, with probably along with my rear axle breather, because it's still stock. You can see I've got the breather right there. So I don't know where to put that yet, but that will come in time. For now, it's been running fine, and California is not too wet anyway, so it hasn't been any mud or water getting into there. So the tank is on a custom bracket from Wits End. If you're an 80 series owner, you probably know what Wits End is. They make a lot of custom parts. The owner, I will post a link in the description for this bracket. The only problem is that it's not cheap. I think this was like $200. If I'm wrong, I will do that in post process. But it was about $200, and it's kind of steep. But I mean, this setup is not cheap to begin with. The tank and compressor is $300. Mount is, for the compressor is another $50. That's another $200 at least. So I would say budget at least $600 for onboard air, because you got wiring to. Chances are, if you are doing onboard air, you either have an upgraded alternator, dual alternator, or dual battery, which is what I have on this car. I have two batteries. It's a 30 amp circuit, so you definitely want good power. Or at least on the 80 series, you definitely want either 2 batteries or the Sequoia alternator, because that's 150 amps. Ideally both. So you can ideally connect anything that would use a regular shop quick disconnect to this setup, and it works fine. Over here I have a pressure relief valve. I believe it blows off at 150 psi. You can see the clearance is a little tight there, so I've put a piece of rubber just in case it does end up touching. I haven't had any issues yet with that. And then again, I have a safety switch there that's on, and it turns on at 70 psi. So it turns the compressor on at 70 psi, and it turns it off at 100. The tank is rated for 150, so that's very conservative. So we got some construction and landscaping going on in the background, so, you know, apologize for that, but I gotta make the video. So this is my little switch panel that I have here in the 80, and these were just blank switches. These are OEM Toyota switches. They're for fog lights, and I just bought some labels online to just put it over the little fog light symbol. They're not perfect. I mean, there's like, I was hoping there was a floodlight one and maybe one that just said fan, but it's good enough. So this is my air compressor switch, and that, I mean, the car's off right now, so it's not going to turn on, but it comes on when I turn it to accessory. So in the fuse panel here, you can see I have a little added fuse right there on the cigarette lighter fuse. You can see on the diagram here, it's that 15 amp in the upper left. So it's not terribly difficult to wire in. So this is really the business end of what's going on for the air compressor under the hood. Before I zoom in on the actual circuitry, I'm just gonna point out I do have two batteries here. This is a Costco Interstate, so it's not quite the same as a regular Interstate, but they're cheap enough and they're pretty good that I think it's a good battery. And I've got the same battery on the left side. So this is Slee Off-Road's dual battery kit. Gives you a OEM tray and all of the hardware necessary to mount that in. So you get the little bracket, which I just noticed is a little loose, and all the bolts to put it in, and then also the washer relocation kit and the wiring for that as well. You do need to trim it a little bit to make it fit the radiator shroud, but not too bad. So what we have going on here is we just have a positive, I think it's a 4-gauge cable going to here. This is a positive distribution block, and I can't remember if this is 10 gauge or 12 gauge. You want to run a pretty heavy duty wire for the compressor, and since mine is all the way in the back of the truck, I would say it's at least 10-foot cable, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So you definitely want 10 or 12 gauge. We got heavier cable, and got a fuse box here with the relays in it. It's kind of hard to open with one hand, but there you go. So that 10 amp is for an auxiliary cooling fan that I have. 15 amp is for my LED lights, and the 30 amp is for the air compressor. And then they're numbered, or the relays are corresponding to the fuses too. So that's a fan, that's the lights, that's the air compressor. And I couldn't find a good place to put this without it interfering with the hood. So the best solution I had was to drill 2 holes into the body. I generally try to avoid that as much as I can. I don't like drilling into the factory sheet metal. But I figured it's probably an inconspicuous enough area that shouldn't be too big of a deal. So big question, how is it for airing up tires? Well, Viair says that this is good for up to a 35-inch tire. I don't know if I would go up to a 35. I think it's going to be a little too slow, unless if you have 2 compressors. I think if you have 35s or bigger, you definitely want 2 compressors. This is a 32 if you round up a little bit, so it's a 265 75 R16. It's a Michelin Defender, and I air them up to about 40 psi, and when I go off-road I usually air down to 25. So I think per tire, if I start with the compressor full, I've timed it to about 2 minutes a tire. If the compressor's not full and you're starting, it's going to take a little bit longer, but usually anywhere between 1 minute and 30 seconds to 2 minutes per tire. Anyway guys, that's a quick overview. I guess it wasn't that quick, but I tried. Just an overview of my onboard air setup in my 80 series. This is not a review. I haven't used it enough to make a good review, so that will come, with time as I use it more. especially now that I've got it all sorted and everything works pretty well. That review will come in time. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Stick around for more Land Cruiser content and maybe some other vehicles as well.